Welcome to the talk show Lighting the Educational Flame with your host, Mark Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields and academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the talk show Lighting the Educational Flame, brought to you by Great Success Education. I'm your host, Mark Hoberman. Today, our special guest is actor, singer, composer, many other things, Liso Dingwall. Liso, welcome to Lighting the Educational Flame.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So great to have you. So I have to ask you, a lot of our viewers are going to want to know because you're so young, and I know you got into acting way a long time ago when you were really younger. How old were you when you started acting?
I started acting when I was around 5. That's when I met a woman named Linda Townsend. She's based out of Fort Washington, Maryland. And essentially she got me on my start, gave me the basics of everything and kind of paved my way. So essentially that's how I got into it. And I've been doing it ever since. So
5 years old, I remember 5 years old drawing my hand on a piece of paper for Thanksgiving to try to make it the feathers of the turkey. That's what I was doing. So you met this person. You didn't meet her in the hallway. You didn't meet her in the supermarket. How did that meeting come about?
So essentially, when me and my mother and my family were moving from Massachusetts to Maryland, I guess a coworker had spoke with my mother about basically what I was trying to do, because I told my mother I wanted to act. And essentially she provided her with that name as we were moving down there. Essentially we met with her and it was a process. She kind of did an interview with me and kind of to see what I'm capable of doing and teachable, and seeing if I'm teachable or not. So, that's definitely part of the process. And essentially she saw that I had potential, and eventually I learned what I needed to learn in terms of the basics, going to auditions, slating my name, things like that, and how you're supposed to basically carry yourself when you go to auditions and on set as well. So that's kind of how that came about.
That teachable is important because, it's not a skill that you're automatically born with, and you have to be able to take direction well from direction, right. Obviously. I had a student who was actually, I think when he was 15 or 16, he was in a scene from The Sopranos. And it's interesting because if he were my son, I'd let him be on The Sopranos. I wouldn't let him watch The Sopranos. I'd probably let him watch that scene. But I know you were on The Wire. And I saw an episode where you got smacked around. I don't know if you were 9 years old or 12 years old when that happened. I mean, that was some serious stuff. Tell us about that.
That scene, that was an interesting night. It was a long night, but essentially it was a scene where Naaman had found out, essentially Julito McCullum had found out that I had stole his package. And him and Michael Lee, Tristan Mack Wilds, was coming to pull up on me and essentially, try to get the package back. And, you see at the end of the scene there that Naaman kind of saw after the brutal beating I received, kind of was just backing off, like, I don't even want it anymore. It was a deep scene. And, you kind of saw some sympathy and some empathy coming out of him, for somebody who's supposed to be hard.
The guy who was watching the beating was looking, and he looked as shocked as the viewers. When you do something like that, do you tell your friends, I'm shooting a scene, it's going to be on TV in 2 months? Do you not say anything? Do you wait for kids to come into school and say, oh my God, I was watching this and I saw you? How does that work?
Man, telling my friends I was on TV and coming back and forth from school, that was an interesting experience. The first thing that I loved about it is, I'd come back with fast food and, my friends would ask me, yo, can I get some fries? That was the first great part about it. But, I just basically would tell them when it's coming on. They'd be excited. Even in high school, when I did Law and Order, they made a whole announcement. It was interesting. And it's really fun to see the support, from your classmates and from the school. It really is.
Oh, it's outstanding. I saw that Law and Order clip. If I'm not mistaken, because I can hear you talking now, I think you had an accent.
Yes. Yes, I did.
That's something I've interviewed some actors before and spoken to some. And it's interesting that some of them have voice coaches. And what did you do to have that accent? Did you just have a cousin you listened to? Did you have to do some research? Tell us about that all important word that kids hate, homework. What homework did Liso have to do to make that believable?
So after I had booked the role, they had told me that I was going to be speaking in a Haitian dialect, and I had a bit of experience. it's a French kind of dialect, so you had to kind of learn, what words and what letters can't be pronounced, what's pronounced a certain way. And I had to learn that essentially in about a day or two. So I tried my best basically with the couple of hours that I was with the dialect coach. And he really was helping me out through it, very patient with me. And, he really taught me basically in a nutshell, like a crash course of how to get to that accent.
Well, now I'm getting the inside scoop. So I can ask you, they say this person had a dialect coach. What does that look like? A guy sits, he says, say this word, don't say man, say man. I mean, how does that work? Do they give you a script? Do you read? Then they say, no, it sounds more like that, more like this. How does that come about?
So it's interesting, as an actor to try to incorporate another dialect on top of incorporating it with your character, and how they're reacting in that present moment in the scene. And having to consciously remember, oh, when I'm saying these things, I have to remember not to pronounce this letter, or I have to pronounce it this way, or I have to drag this letter out, on top of the emotion and the passion you have to have in the scene. So basically, he took it step by step with me, and kind of just figured out, what do I know how to, what accents have I been familiar with, and kind of, I told him I'm African, I'm Jamaican descent. So, I basically gave him a bit of a nutshell of what I knew how to do. And he worked with me from there and told me, okay, well, when you say these words, or when you say this letter, it's pronounced this way, or it's silent, or you drag this letter, and, just speak as natural as you possibly can. You can't force it. He definitely emphasized that. So, it was definitely an experience, and he was very patient, and that's what I do commend a lot of people that do teach, and in general, teachers and dialect coaches, acting coaches, everything. It takes a lot of patience sometimes. So I do commend people for that.
Absolutely. And let me ask you a question. When you get the script, I don't know, is there a table read only for the main characters? Is there a table read for everyone in an episode? Were you involved in what they call a table read?
So in that Law and Order role, no. It was more so how it usually goes in those settings, from what I've experienced, is essentially I would get the sides, and I would read them, of course, while I'm on set or on the way to set. Right. And essentially we would read them there, or we would go over them right there on, like, right where the scene is going to be. And really? It's very fun and interesting, but it's a serious moment too, because you want to kind of get the gist of how the scene is going to go, the flow of everything. And so that's kind of how it happened in terms of a table read. I've only experienced one of those on, like, doing like theater. So it's definitely something that is exciting to do, especially being around in the common presence of other people, and you all are just sitting there instead of just doing the actions and standing up and doing it, but just reading it and having the emotion.
Definitely. And you can see behind me, I have some pictures with celebrities and whatnot. And I'm a celebrity stalker. I wouldn't get through a scene because in the middle I'd say, time out. Can I have your autograph? How about a quick selfie? So for a kid to be able to go in and do that and be with the adults and the professionals, it's got to be very difficult. I always, when I was younger, and I don't know how they do this now, but I would always say to myself, how could I ever want to be an actor? They would have to put the script in front of me. I'd have to read it. I'll memorize one line if it's hello. But other than that, tell our viewers about the homework and the work and the passion needed to take that. You have to memorize lines that aren't yours. You're playing a character who isn't you, and you've got to make it believable to the people watching the story. What's that path like?
That path is interesting because, as I've learned, as I've gone through my career, you learn a lot of different things, a lot of different techniques, and just little nuances in the game about acting. And just the passion, the work ethic you have to have. If you want to get to the top, you got to work. Sometimes you'll get a script for an audition a day or two before the actual audition. So, you should be spending, your night or both those nights studying, going over it in the mirror with yourself and going over your lines, memorizing your lines, going over it with a friend, things like that. Like basically working so that you have it down pat, like it's like you're breathing, basically. You have to want it. And you got to work hard. It's
Oh, yeah.
definitely,
Greatest
you're
saying,
going to get a lot of no's. So
it is an educational show, and we often say, too often we know the glory, but we don't know the story. So I hear things that are demanding. I hear passion. I hear work. I hear seriousness. And tell us a difficult situation. Tell us something that you didn't like about acting. Tell us, why it's not always so easy, and how you have to persevere in that industry.
The way to persevere is kind of being able to, being able to step outside yourself and being able to understand, when it comes to like people writing works and things like that, and you're doing television shows or movies, being able to understand what exactly the message is in the piece, and portraying that as best as you can as the character, thinking about that outside of yourself. Like, for instance, for those who have read it, it's a play called The Colored Museum. And I played Miss Raj. I did the Miss Raj monologue in that play.
You played a woman.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a woman, but it's more so like a drag queen, basically, a trans. Yes.
Did you have a stash? Did you have a stash then?
I did. Okay. I did. So I mean, but I had to shave it. It had to go. So for the role, and I had to be comfortable. I had to be able to step outside of that. I had to learn what it's like to put wigs on, and you have to tuck, your stuff. It's crazy. Like it's you had to go all the way. You have to be able to dive deep, so you can understand exactly what the message is, because the message in that monologue, that being written around the 80s, and around the time where, you had the crack cocaine pandemic, you had, gangs that were going crazy at the time. You had a lot of violence and gang related things, wars. You had it all going on during the 80s, and, how transgender people or people that identify as that, how we're being treated. It was really bad. It was really bad, especially during those times. So, that's basically what that monologue, or the essence of that monologue was. It's the passion and the anger, and, basically the solution. She's basically explaining, we're people too, we're people too. So.
Absolutely. So interesting that a person of color steps into another role where people are often mistreated, misunderstood. So I would argue that you were doing double duty when you took on that role. That's quite an experience.
Yes.
What are some of your favorite moments in your acting career? How old are you now?
I'm 25.
Okay, so don't think you're too old, because I'm not 25. So I have ties older than you. So don't think 25, because I know you started early. But so what are some of your favorite moments in your career?
Some of my favorite moments in my career that were seen and unseen. I have quite a few, but I'll give you my top three. Okay. And this is not in a particular order. But of course, being able to say that I shot Omar and actually shooting that scene, how it affected me after, if people know the story, basically, after shooting that scene, it looked so real to me. I'm a 10-year-old holding a gun in his hand. I've never held a gun. It was heavy. I've never experienced anything like that before. And the way, Michael K. Williams, shout out to Big Bro, he, consoled me after, because I essentially, after I did the scene, I ran down the block. Like, I actually killed him. I was scared. I was crying. Like, it was a whole big thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he was there, he came back in, had the makeup on his head, he was talking to me, trying to lighten me up. But, that moment was just a moment where it was like, I truly experienced something almost traumatic, and I was being able to be there, and, they'd be able to pull me back in, basically. That's one. My second one probably would have to be that role we were just speaking about, Miss Raj, because I think that was a role that I really was completely outside of my comfort zone.
That was on stage, correct?
Correct.
So there's a big difference between film and stage.
Yes.
Live audience, big difference.
Oh yeah, huge difference. And the energy is definitely a lot different. Getting the vibes and the energy and the responses back from the crowd in theater, it's amazing. At least for me, it's a thrill. I enjoy that. Then you can tell when the audience is really paying attention and watching you and trying to, follow the story and follow the message of what a piece really is. But, that role definitely had me step way out of my comfort zone, sir. Like, I've never experienced or done anything to that extent before since then. But you know, Professor Charlo, back when she was at Bowie State, you know, definitely put me through that, you know, got me through that process. And there was another gentleman who, you know, who actually lived through that and was doing the, you know, was cross-dressing and going to, you know, balls and things like that, actually did my makeup, did my costume, you know, brought the materials and everything, and kind of helped and guided me as well. So that experience was just definitely one of my favorites. And the third, oh man, it'll probably have to be when I did Resurrection in Hartford Stage. It was definitely a good production there. The energy there was definitely good. The talkbacks were always very intriguing in terms of how people interpreted the roles of the six gentlemen that were on the stage, and what they individually were going through in that one night. You know, seeing people's perspective and hearing what they were thinking, it's definitely good. And being able to say that I left you, you know, thinking at the end of the night is kind of the goal as an actor.
And you mentioned talkbacks. I went to a play once, I think it was Fences on Broadway with Denzel, and some other actors came on afterwards, Felicia Rashad. And it was interesting because you asked them questions about the character. It's not just lines on a page. The fact that you spoke to feeling bad and you held the gun, and yeah, someone else would say, oh, Liso, it's just acting. What's the big deal? But when you really hone your craft, you morph into that character.
Right.
So we talked about your acting, we talked about film, we talked about stage. As if you're not doing enough, I know you are heavily involved in music, and you kind of have done music in the past, and now there's a sort of a resurgence and a reviving of your musical career. What's going on with that?
Well, right now, I'm currently in the works of releasing an EP. I'm currently untitled, but it's coming out in July. Definitely on the way. I'm more, if I had to give a description of my music and my style, it would be kind of just around the R&B, hip hop kind of thing, but more so, it's kind of like, if I had to give an artist description or comparison, or artist that I look up to, I really like Chris Brown. I'm a huge fan. Don Toliver, huge fan of him and Travis Scott and that whole, you know, that whole label, and how they do music. Usher, of course, a legend. So all those people kind of inspire me, you know, in my music. But essentially, that's kind of the style and the workings that I'm doing. So definitely be on the lookout.
I will be on the lookout. Excellent stuff. I know that we've spoken before, and you had mentioned how important education was in your life, a certain school you may have gone to. What can you tell our viewers about the education you received, how it served you so well, how you utilized it in your career path?
My education, definitely, each time I learned something as I progressed in life, especially with going to Suitland High School. Suitland High School definitely taught me a lot. I was in the visual performing arts program there. My teacher, Miss Holloman Clay, Isis Clay, I should say, was definitely the root to my theater background. She taught me basically everything I know in regards to theater, and, you know, pushed me to be a better actor on stage as well as off stage and on screen. So learning Shakespeare, learning about, you know, Greek mythology and all the Greek plays and things like that. It's Euripides and all of that. It's just thinking about that stuff. It's nostalgic. But essentially, it was a stepping stone, because from learning from theater to from Suitland High School and learning, having my theater background there, it definitely propelled me, because at the same time I was doing Resurrection. And right. Resurrection was a play written by Daniel Beatty, a play I was doing, like I was speaking about previously. Those aspects that I was learning in school definitely helped me in applying that into my character and into my acting on stage when I was doing that play. And has carried me on since then, since I've done productions, even in college. So the education is definitely important. You gotta have it. Because it's definitely going to be utilized, especially in this field. You're gonna be learning a lot. You know, there's going to be a ton of things you don't know, and I'm still learning. So
All that stuff, still learning. You mentioned, I mean, some of these words I taught for 33 years. In the beginning, when you mentioned Shakespeare, people start crying, and not for a good reason. You know, I don't understand that language. And if you have a good teacher, and I hope I was a good teacher, you make it exciting. But Greek mythology, some people like it, some don't. But the fact that you put it into your craft and you're still using it now, and I'm hearing so much about learning, and I'm still learning. And my God, you're 25 years old. You're very old, and you're still learning. I think that's so. I want to shift gears a little bit here. I do know a little bit about adversity. I wrote a memoir about my experiences with a medical diagnosis as a teen. It's not always easy to speak about your struggles in adversity. I know you've done that. Can you tell our viewers about adversity that you've been dealing with?
And adversity, I feel like I had been dealing with, especially, I wouldn't say now, but just basically when I was a kid, starting off in high school when I was 16, 17 years old. When my vitiligo developed, it definitely, kind of put a dent on my confidence and just how I.
And that's a skin. I want people to know that that's a skin disease.
Yes.
Okay.
I lose pigmentation in certain parts of my body, and essentially, it definitely affects how you look. And some people respectfully, were appreciative of it. Really thought it was unique. Some people didn't. Right. Kind of affected my confidence in some ways. It definitely made me think about my career in terms of how it would go and how, what roles would I get with, having this, and having to cover it up because, it took me a while to be able to say I was proud of it. And once I was, I don't, it's not something I want to hide, it's not something I want to cover up. Of course, if I have to for a role, then, of course, but, essentially, if I don't have to, I won't. And that's kind of my thing. I embrace it. I really like it. And somebody that definitely, of course, a major example is Winnie Harlow, the model. So she has it and it's symmetrical and it looks really nice on her and she owned it, and it made her unique and it got her where she is today. So definitely something that inspires people that whoever has that. And I know I do, for everyone who does, who may be watching. So definitely just push through. Don't let it affect you. It makes you unique. It makes you different. In fact, it makes you stand out and always be proud of it.
Right. You can't always control a situation, but we can always control our attitude about a situation. The mantra of my book was always, don't let your struggles define you. You define you. But right. I will tell you, I was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 16. At 25, at 35, at 45, I did not have the view that you have. So for you to have 25, I didn't write my book till I was 54. Nobody knew. 9 or 10 people knew that epilepsy. So I think for our adult viewers and teen viewers watching, these are such tremendous golden words of wisdom on how to live your life. And I applaud you for that. Liso, how can people find out more about you?
You can always follow me on Instagram. I.shot.omar. It's kind of like, so the name came from originally how the name came from, because most people ask like, what does that mean? Right. I have to, of course, go into explanation and explain what it is. But, a lot of people tell me that it's so unique and it's like a fact. It's like a great Instagram name. So I.shot.omar. And
let me ask a question, because I love that show. It's one of my son's favorite shows. Omar wasn't the drug dealer. Who was Omar in the show? I think that was
Omar was like the vigilante of the show. He took the drugs from the drug dealers and knew where the stash houses were. He was the sheriff in town, kind of sweeping everybody out. Until eventually, my leader, my head honcho in the show, Marlo, essentially, had that put together, and hence that scene happened, and that's what happened to him. So that's kind of basically where that came from. But he was basically a vigilante.
Gotcha. So I will tell you something interesting. I'm asking because I'm more than double your age, and there was a show called Dallas on years ago. I'm a tremendous fan, and the biggest thing in the 70s was somebody shot the main character JR, and that was the cliffhanger of the season. So I had a shirt, as did everyone, that said I shot JR. So when you say I shot Omar, people are like, oh my God, who ever heard of such a thing? But I'm talking 40 something years ago. That was the big thing. So that I find that so interesting. What a great Instagram name, because it makes you question, what's this about? So I got to tell you, Lisa, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and speaking so honestly with us and courageously. I'm excited to share with our viewers the great news that Lisa will be on our show from time to time as a very special guest host. So we're announcing that today for the first time. And to the viewers, remember to reach out to us on social media. Look for Great Success on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. You can also find me, Mark Hoberman, on LinkedIn. Again, thanks to Liso Dingwall for being with us today. Viewers, don't forget to tune into our next show. This is Mark Hoberman thanking you for watching Lighting the Educational Flame, and have a great day. Liso, thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you for watching Lighting the Educational Flame. To contact Mark Hoberman, email him at info@greatsuccess.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Lighting the Educational Flame.